I overheard the Alpha King laugh at my moon seal with another woman, so I left for the Dragon King, a real-life story, narrated in third person. She found out on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic Tuesday. Not the kind where the sky turns the wrong color and birds fly into windows and the milk curdles on its own. Just a regular, cold, slightly too quiet Tuesday in the east wing of the palace, where the stone floors had been absorbing centuries of secrets, and not one of them had ever volunteered anything back. Her name was Nyla, 24 years old. Cartographer by training, queen by accident, and believer. Deep in her chest, in that specific soft spot between the ribs that most people use for faith or foolishness, in the moon seal. The moon seal. It had been on her body since she was born. A mark, silver-white and crescent-shaped, sitting just below her left collarbone, like someone had pressed a coin against wet skin and pulled away before it dried. In her village, a small place on the northern border where people still kept older customs, older calendars, older words for the same old feelings, the moon seal was not a curiosity. It was not superstition. It was not the kind of thing you explained away at dinner parties. It was a fact, a biological, cosmological, absolutely certain fact. The woman who carried it was a fated mate. Someone, somewhere, would know what it meant when they saw it. Nyla had believed this the way she believed in longitude, the way she believed that rivers run downhill and that wrong maps get people killed, steadily, without drama, with the calm certainty of a woman who has spent her whole life measuring things precisely. She had believed it right up until she was 3 steps from a half-open door in the east corridor, holding a bone tube full of updated border maps, and heard her husband laugh. Not his court laugh, not the practiced, slightly too loud one he used at banquets when someone told a joke that wasn't quite funny but needed to be rewarded anyway. The real one, low, unguarded, the kind that lives in the back of the throat and only comes out when a person isn't thinking about being watched. She had heard that laugh exactly 3 times in 4 years of marriage. She stopped walking. Inside the room, the voice of a woman she did not immediately recognize, low and warm and deeply amused, asking something. The question was casual, the kind of question people ask when they already know the answer and are enjoying the confirmation. Was the moon seal really as old-fashioned as the stories made it sound? A silver smudge on the chest of some provincial girl from a border village, and that was supposed to bind a king to her forever. Nyla stood very still in the corridor. The maps were heavy, she was aware of that. The bone tube was pressing into the soft inside of her arm. Later she would not be able to say what the stone floor looked like right then, or what the light was doing in the corridor, or whether the window at the far end was open or closed. What she would remember, with the awful precision of a thing that burns itself into memory without asking permission, was the pause before the answer. A breath, a small sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sigh, but lived somewhere between them. And then King Aldrich, 4th of his name, Alpha of the Northern Pax, the man she had married at 20 years old in a ceremony where his hands had been warm and steady on hers, said, in the real voice, the true voice, the voice she had spent 4 years believing was hers. It was quaint. She believed it so earnestly it was almost touching. Past tense. She hadn't moved, hadn't breathed. The word almost was the wall, and she had walked straight into it. Almost touching. She turned around. She walked back down the corridor the way she had come. Her footsteps were even. The maps did not drop. She did not run. She went back past the war room, past the portrait of Aldrich's grandmother looking disapproving in oil paint, past the window where the winter light came in thin and gave nothing. She walked into her chambers and sat on the edge of the bed. She sat there for a while. Part 2. Here is what Nyla knew about herself. Before any of this, she was not a woman built for palace life. She had known that on the first day, when a lady-in-waiting had gently explained that a queen does not eat standing up in the corridor outside the kitchens, and Nyla had looked at the perfectly good bread in her hand and nodded with the expression of a person filing information under unlikely to follow. She was good at maps. She was good at borders and distances, and understanding that the gap between where a thing is and where you believe it to be, is the single most dangerous measurement in the world. She had applied that skill to Aldrich, carefully, thoroughly, the way she approached every terrain she needed to understand. She had mapped the edges of him, where he was warm, where he went cold, where the lines on his face deepened at dinner when something in the reports was worrying him. She had noted the way he softened slightly when she spread a map on the war table and explained what the northern passes actually looked like versus what his generals thought they looked like. She had filed the moments when he listened, genuinely listened, not the political performance of listening, and labeled them. She had built, over 4 years, what she believed was a reliable cartography of a person. She had been wrong. Not about everything, not cruelly wrong, just the map was not the territory. The territory had a room in it she had never been permitted to enter, and in that room the real geography was happening. She sat on the bed for long enough that the light changed. Then she got up, went to the window, looked out at the northern courtyard where the training yard sat half covered in snow, and the banner above the gate was too stiff with cold to move. Thought about her mother, who had pressed her palm flat against the moon seal the morning of the royal courtship and said, with the plain voice of a woman who has seen things clearly her whole life, "He will not deserve it, but he will know." Nyla had thought that meant he would know its worth, that the mark would speak for itself, that being seen clearly was the same thing as being valued. Her mother had not meant that. Her mother had meant exactly what she said. He will know. He will look at the thing that is real and rare and marked by something older than his bloodline, and he will know, and still not deserve it, because knowing and deserving are different countries. A man can stand at the border of something sacred and still not cross with any reverence. She understood this now. She went to the locked drawer in her writing desk. She had kept it locked not out of secrecy, but out of the particular sentimentality of a person who understands that some things, once taken out, cannot be put back unchanged. Inside, her bone mapping tubes, her 3 best pencils worn to specific lengths she had memorized, a letter from a colleague in the southern provinces about a river that had moved, and, at the back, under a folded cloth, a commission letter from the Dragon King's court. The Eastern Realm, Draven. A request for a land surveyor with knowledge of northern border terrain and high-altitude pass mapping, sealed with black wax and a dragon pressed into it, which she had found interesting in the way she found all unfamiliar cartography interesting. 6 months ago, when it had arrived, Aldrich had looked at it across the breakfast table and said, without looking up from his reports, "Decline it." She had written the decline that afternoon, politely, without asking why. She unfolded the letter now. Read it. Read it again, more slowly, the way she read a map that had more information in it than she had caught the first time. The commission was still open. The letter said as much. A postscript, added in different ink, smaller handwriting, as if added after the formal part was already dry. If the timing changes, the position remains available. Skilled northern surveyors are not common. She folded it, held it, sat with it for a while, the way you sit with a door before you decide whether to open it. Then she got up and began to pack. Part 3 Web. She packed the way she mapped. With precision. No excess. Only what was real. What was functional. What she had brought to this palace in the first place. The court dresses stayed. She had not owned them before the marriage, and she was not taking them now. The crown, a thin, severe thing she had never liked, she set on the vanity with the deliberateness of someone returning borrowed property. It had always been a loan. She had been borrowing a title, a role, a life that was not built around her measurements but around an idea of what a queen was supposed to be. She had been walking around in a map that someone else drew of her. She took her maps, her instruments, the bone tubes, her 3 pencils, the commission letter, the clothes from before. She wrote 1 note, kept it short, because there was nothing long to say that would not be a performance of feelings she did not currently have. She was not angry yet. She was not sad yet. She was in that clean, dangerous space between the two, where clarity lives, briefly, before the weather comes in. She left the note on his pillow. his side. At the main gate, the night guard blinked at her. She was dressed plainly. She was carrying her own bags. It was just past midnight, and the courtyard was cold enough that her breath made small clouds that vanished before they went anywhere. He asked where she was going. East, she said. He should have asked more. He didn't. She was a queen, and queens, in his experience, were not the kind of people you questioned when they decided to walk out into winter dark with their own baggage. She walked through the gate. It closed behind her. She did not look back. Not because she was being dramatic about it, not because she was performing the gesture of a woman who does not look back, but because the map was already in front of her, and the north wind was already on her face, and she had a very long way to go east, and she had always been better at moving toward things than away from them. Part 4. Draven. The road to Draven took 11 days. She had done longer surveys in worse conditions. 2 winters ago she had spent 3 weeks in the high passes above the Korath Range, measuring terrain that the general's maps had gotten badly wrong, eating dried meat and drawing by the light of oil lamps in a tent that had one small stove and a persistent draft from the southeast that she eventually stopped fighting and started accounting for in her wind speed calculations. 11 days was nothing. She moved through the border country, that strange, half-wild territory between the Wolflands and the Dragonlands where the mountains changed character gradually, the way a person's face changes when you've known them long enough. The Alpha King's country was all vertical lines, hard peaks, severe, everything reaching upward. The passes cut through them like old wounds. Draven came in differently. The mountains here were older, rounder, worn by something she couldn't name, or maybe worn by the sheer age of the dragon lines that had lived here longer than the wolf packs had lived in the north. The stone was darker. The trees were taller and spaced differently, like they had arrived on purpose and chosen their spots with some consideration for the other trees. She noticed all of it, filed it. Already her fingers were moving toward the pencils. She was, at the end of everything, a woman who responded to unfamiliar country by wanting to draw it. The Dragon King's city appeared on the 9th day, first as a smudge of smoke on the horizon, then as towers, then as walls, then as the full, complicated reality of a city that had been built by people who thought differently about the relationship between a structure and the sky. The towers were tall, very tall, and curved at the top in ways that suggested they had been designed by someone who had watched dragons land on them and decided to work with that rather than against it. She found the commission's contact, a small, busy woman in the cartography annex, who looked at Nyla's credentials the way a jeweler looks at something they hadn't expected to be real, and was given a room, a key, and a meeting time for the morning. She slept better than she had in 4 years. She did not examine why. Part 5. The Dragon King, Kalux, 4th of his name, which she found strange symmetry in later, was not what she had pictured. She had pictured something like Aldrich, but more so, more formal, more severe, more wall-like, in the way that powerful men in her experience tended toward wall-like qualities, solid, load-bearing, not particularly interested in what was happening on the other side of themselves. She met him in the practice yard. He had sawdust on his boots, which she clocked immediately because she was a person who noticed where dust settles and what it means about how a space is being used. He was taller than she expected. Most people she had tried to pre-map in her head turned out to be a different size than expected, and there was a quality to the way he stood that she had no precise word for. Not relaxed exactly, not alert exactly, something in between, the posture of a person who has made their peace with the weight of the thing they carry. He looked at her, then at the bone tubes under her arm, then back at her, with the direct, unperformed attention of someone who does not bother with the social performance of assessment. "You're the cartographer," he said. "Former queen," she said. "Current cartographer." He did not ask about the former. He did not make the face that most people made, the slight widening of the eyes, the recalibrating glance, the rearranging of their assumptions, when they discovered they were talking to someone who had recently uncrowded themselves. He simply absorbed the information the way a good map reader absorbs a correction, adjusted, moved on. He asked about the northern passes, specifically about the Korath Range, whether the existing survey maps were as unreliable as the reports suggested. She told him yes, told him which passes, which season, which measurements were wrong and how wrong, and what the actual safe routes were and why. She was precise. She was not performing competence. She was just doing what she did. He listened with his whole face, not nodding along, not performing listening, actually tracking, actually following the geography in his head. She could tell by the way his eyes moved. People who are really listening to spatial information look slightly to the side and up, like they're projecting the terrain in the air in front of them. He did that. She noticed. He assigned her an office that afternoon, east-facing. The window was enormous, almost the whole wall, and the light came in at the angle she liked best for close work, the angle that eliminated shadow without washing out the pencil marks. She did not remark on this. It took her 3 days to realize it had not been a coincidence. Part 6. The Court of Draven was not like the Alpha Court. The Alpha Court had a particular energy that she had spent 4 years studying without ever quite naming. A kind of performed calm over a competing current of hierarchy. Everyone always aware of their position relative to everyone else. Conversations that functioned like chess moves. Silences that communicated rank. Draven's court was louder, messier. People interrupted each other and then apologized, and then interrupted again, in a way that suggested the interruption was meant genuinely, and the apology was more of a social reflex than an actual correction. The War Council met in a room with too many chairs and not enough table, and people brought food, actual food. Someone once brought a dog. She had expected to feel out of place here. She had spent 4 years learning one particular social geometry, and this one operated on different principles. She did not feel out of place. She felt, and this was the strange part, the part she turned over and examined carefully in the privacy of her own thoughts before letting herself believe it. She felt like she was allowed to take up the space she actually occupied. In the north, she had always slightly shrunk herself. Not because anyone had asked her to, not because Aldrich had ever said, "Make yourself smaller." It was subtler than that. It was the accumulation of rooms where she already knew she was there, as an adjunct to someone else's story. A map rolled to a secondary position. Here, people asked her questions and then waited for the full answer without looking at anything else while they waited. It was a small thing. It did not feel small. She started leaving her office door open. Jess, Part 7. The Moon Seal. He saw it on the 3rd day, when she leaned across the drafting table to point at a specific elevation marker in the northeastern quadrant of the survey she was building, and her collar shifted. Just a few centimeters. Just enough. She felt the air change, not dramatically, just the way air changes when someone becomes aware of something. She straightened, pulled her collar back. He said nothing. Not nothing as in dismissal, not nothing as in discomfort. Nothing as in, he saw it, it registered, and he chose to let her have the moment of covering it without making anything of the covering. He returned his attention to the border report in his hand. She watched him from the corner of her eye for the rest of that session. He did not bring it up. She did not bring it up, but something had shifted, the way terrain shifts, slowly, without announcement, until you look down and realize the ground is different from the ground you were standing on before. Part 8. Aldrich's letter arrived in the 4th week. She recognized his handwriting on the courier's case before she even opened it. She had spent 4 years reading his scripts across dinner tables and war room notes and the occasional brief thing left on her desk when he'd been in her chambers, and she hadn't. The letter was 4 pages long. 4 pages of the formal, balanced, kingly prose he used when he wanted to be persuasive without seeming to want anything. She had learned to read it the way she learned to read a map that had been drawn by someone who wanted to guide you in a particular direction, deliberately, with attention to what wasn't marked. He wanted her to come back. He found the situation embarrassing. He used the word unfortunate 4 times. He did not use the word sorry. She read the whole letter over her morning coffee, which had gotten cold by the 3rd page. She turned it over. Used the blank back of the 4th page. Good heavy paper, good for drafting, to sketch the river delta in the southeastern quadrant that had been giving her trouble all week. The drainage pattern was strange. It shouldn't fork there. She needed to go look at it in person and see if the survey from 2 decades ago had measured it in a wetter season, which would explain the discrepancy. The sketch helped. There was a second letter, shorter, from the woman in the east corridor. It was an apology that had the structure of an explanation, which meant it was primarily an explanation with an apology in the right place to make it harder to refuse. Nyla read it twice, because she was honest enough to take seriously the possibility that she had missed something, some dimension of the situation that deserved consideration. She hadn't missed anything. She folded both letters, put them in a drawer she labeled, in her own mind, closed territories. She did not respond, not because she was being cold, because there was genuinely nothing to say that would move the situation forward. A response would only open a door she had no interest in standing in. She went back to the river delta. The drainage pattern yielded, eventually. It always did. Bot Part 9. She had been in Draven for 2 months when Kalux started bringing her tea. It was not good tea. She had no way to determine if this was a consistent quality or if he made it specifically bad for her visits, which she found, upon reflection, equally likely. It was too strong. The leaves had been in the water for too long, possibly while he was doing something else and forgot, and it had the particular bitterness of a beverage that had given up on being pleasant and was now simply informative. He set it on her drafting table with the casual confidence of a man who had decided to do something and was not going to second-guess the doing of it. He did not apologize for the tea. She drank it. He pulled up a stool. She had noticed that he never took the chair, always the stool, which put him lower than the table level and created an equality of sightline that she suspected was not accidental, and asked about what she was working on. She told him about the delta, about the drainage discrepancy, about the way old surveys were dangerous not because they were wrong but because they were right, about a world that no longer existed, and the people using them trusted them without accounting for the time that had passed and the land that had moved. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is also true about people." She looked at him. He was looking at the map, not at her, which she had come to understand was the way he said things he meant most seriously, aimed slightly sideways, so there was room to let them land without the landing being a confrontation. She thought about Aldrich's map of her, the one he had been working from, the one that had her village girl earnestness in it, her provincial faith, her charming belief in a silver mark that bound people together. He had kept that map, used it, navigated by it, without ever checking if it still matched the territory. "I know," she said. The tea was very bad. She finished it anyway. Part 10. She went to see the river delta in person in the 7th week. Kalux came. Not because she asked, not because it was expected. He said he had business in the Eastern District that week, which she later came to understand was his version of the sideways delivery. True, technically, but arranged around something else. They rode out in the early morning, when the air was still doing that eastern thing she had not encountered in the north, the way the light came in low and gold and slightly sideways, making everything look like a thing that had been carefully considered before being placed. She worked. He watched. Not hovering, he had the rare quality of being present without pressure, occupying space without filling it with need. He sat on a rock above the bank while she waded into the shallower water near the fork and checked the silt patterns with the rod she used for depth measurement. She was right. The old survey had been done in a wetter season. The channel was shifted. The fork was younger than the map suggested. She made notes, many notes. Her handwriting, when she was excited about terrain, became illegible to everyone except herself. A private code of compressed measurements and observations that existed in real time and could be translated into proper survey language later. She looked up at some point and realized he was watching her with an expression she did not immediately recognize. It took her a moment. He was watching the way people watch something they find genuinely interesting. Not charming interesting, not performing interest, because it is polite interesting. The real version. The kind that happens in the eyes before the face catches up with it. She went back to the silt pattern. Her pencil moved faster. Teen Part 11. Here is the part that is difficult to say without it sounding like a particular kind of story, which it is not. Or maybe it is, but only partially, and the other parts are more important. She did not fall in love with the Dragon King. Not in the 7th week, or the 8th, or the 3rd month. Not in the clean, resolved way that gets narrated as a single moment. She was a cartographer. She did not trust single moments. She trusted accumulation. She trusted the slow, measured process of surveying something properly before you commit to drawing the lines. What she did was this. She began to let herself be mapped. That was the difference. In the North, she had done all the mapping herself. She had been the one with the pencil and the rod and the careful eye. Aldrich had never been curious enough about the terrain of her to pick up the instrument. She had loved him the way you can love a country you explore alone, fully, genuinely, but without the particular texture of being accompanied. Caylux was curious. Not in the invasive way, not in the way of someone who wants to possess the information, in the way of someone who finds the territory worth the effort of understanding. He asked questions that revealed he had been paying attention. About the North, about her training, about the specific kind of cartography she preferred, topographical over political. She said, because political maps lie by commission, and topographical maps only lie by omission, and between the two she knew which kind of dishonesty she could work with. He remembered what she said. He asked follow-up questions weeks later, which meant he had filed it somewhere. He made her terrible tea twice a week, and did not improve it, which she began to understand was not negligence but was instead a kind of consistency she had not been offered before. He told her, in the sideways manner, that the east-facing window had been requested specifically. The previous surveyor had preferred west light, and the office had been arranged accordingly, and when the commission for a northern cartographer went out, he had the window changed before the letter was even sent. She had stared at him for a moment when he said this. He was looking at the map again. She went back to work, but her pencil was moving differently, lighter, like the pressure she had been applying without realizing it had quietly redistributed itself somewhere that was not her hand. Part 12. The moon seal came up. Eventually, not because she brought it up, because he asked, not intrusively, not with the weight of someone who needs an answer, but with the particular kind of question that signals, this is yours to answer or not answer, and either is acceptable. He had seen enough of dragon culture, he said, to know that marks like that were not decoration and were not accident. He did not pretend to be an expert in Wolfland customs. He said only, the old cultures have reasons for the things they mark. She was quiet for a long time. Then she told him what it meant, what her mother had told her it meant, what she had believed it meant, what she had found out it meant, to a man who could look at something rare and still find it only almost touching. She did not cry while she told it. She was past the weather now. She was in the clear, flat light that comes after weather, where everything is visible and the distances are precise, and you can see a very long way in all directions. He listened with his whole face. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time too. Then he said, that kind of mark doesn't belong to whoever dismisses it. It belongs to whoever recognizes it properly. She looked at him. He was still looking at the map. She had been a cartographer long enough to understand that the most important topographical features are the ones that look, from a distance, like ordinary ground. Part 13. The last one. There is a map on the wall of her office now. She drew it herself, over the course of 4 months, and it is the most accurate survey of the Draven-Korath borderlands that has ever existed. It accounts for seasonal drift in 3 of the major passes. It corrects 11 errors in the previous regional maps. It includes the river delta exactly as it is, not as it was decades ago. She is proud of it, not in the loud way, in the quiet way that sits in the chest and doesn't need an audience. Calyx's court has accepted her with the slightly chaotic efficiency it applies to most things, fully, without ceremony, as if she had always been there, and the adjustment was simply a matter of updating the relevant information. There is a woman in the War Council who argues with her about optimal route calculation, and is absolutely wrong, and also the best argument she has had with anyone in years. There is a junior cartographer who is 17 and brilliant, and has never once been told that his way of measuring elevation is unusual in a way that should be corrected, and she intends to keep it that way. She has stopped wearing anything that covers the moon seal. Not as a declaration, not as a statement, simply because she stopped feeling like it needed to be managed. It is on her body. It has always been on her body. It belongs to the same geography as everything else about her. The trained hands, the specific way she holds a pencil, the cold weather instincts she grew up with on the northern border. It is not a wound, it is not a credential, it is a coordinate. She is mapping the eastern mountains now. There is a range to the south that no formal survey has touched in 3 generations. The passes are rumored to be navigable in summer and dangerous in spring, but no one has measured them properly, and rumors are not data. She is going in the spring. Kalux has said, in the sideways manner, that he has business in the southern district that season. She has not said, "I know what you're doing." She has said, "Bring your own tea provisions. I am not carrying supplies for a beverage that tastes like that." He has written back, not a letter, just a note, the kind a person writes when they want to say something and don't need it to be formal, that the tea is an acquired taste, and she has simply not acquired it yet. She is not sure if she believes him. She is not sure if that is the point. Outside the east-facing window, the Dragon King's towers catch the morning light and hold it, the way things hold it when they were built for that purpose. The birds she still cannot name spiral around the highest one, doing whatever it is birds do when they are not going anywhere specific but are moving anyway, for the feeling of it. She opens her maps, picks up her pencil. The eastern country is still full of territory she has not drawn yet. The lines are waiting for her. The measurement has not been done. She is, and has always been, an excellent cartographer. She has always found the important things by going toward them. End.